Hi, Susie, you there? Excellent. Well, we're all here and accounted for. So we'll start at 7 on the dot, which I believe is in about 1 minute's time. I guess we're off mute now. So if you just announce when we're live streaming, I'll start the meeting. Okay, well, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Vale of Whitehorse Oxfordshire District Council's Planning Committee. I'm Councillor Max Thompson, and I'm chairing this meeting. This meeting is being held at our office in Abbey House, Abingdon. Voting members are here in person as required, but officers and public speakers are able to join remotely if they wish through Microsoft Teams. The meeting is also being streamed live and recorded on the Council's YouTube channel for public viewing. So I have 3 procedural matters. Firstly, for those joining remotely, when you're not speaking, please ensure your microphone is muted and your camera is off. Public speakers must only have their cameras on and be unmuted when addressing the committee or answering questions of clarification in their designated slots. And number 2, if councillors wish to ask a question or participate in debate, please raise your hand and I'll call on you in turn. And 3, as a modern council, both officers and members will be using their electronic devices throughout the meeting. I have 4 housekeeping announcements. So firstly, evacuation procedure. In the event of an emergency, please evacuate the building by the nearest exit, which is in the corridor immediately to your right, and stand for 70.9 in the outside area beyond the fire exit. And our Democratic Services Officer can assist you. On arriving at the meeting, you should have read the emergency evacuation procedure and signed a fire register, so please inform Democratic Services if you have not done so. Number 2, phones off or silent. 3, members of the public who wish to leave the meeting after the application or applications they're interested in have been debated, but we're very welcome to do so via the front door in reception. We please ask that you do so quietly and without engaging with members of the committee. And then 4, when the meeting has ended, I'll ask for confirmation the live stream has ended. At that point, please leave the virtual meeting if you're joining remotely, or make your way out the building, remembering to sign out as you leave. And just a final point, this is a meeting in public, not a public meeting. And I ask that members of the public, both those attending here in person and those attending virtually, ensure they do not shout out or disrupt the committee's deliberations outside of those who've registered to speak in their allocated slots. And so now I turn to agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Matthew, have you got any apologies this evening?
No apologies, Chair. We do have Councillor Sarah James with us tonight, attending as substitute member for the vacancy that we currently have on the committee.
Okay, thank you. And would you mind taking a roll call?
Of course. Councillor Ron Batstone.
Present.
Councillor Jenny Hannaby.
Present.
Councillor Scott Houghton.
Present.
Councillor Sarah James.
Present.
Councillor Robert Madison.
Present.
Councillor Mike Higgles.
Here.
Councillor Jill Rayner. Councillor Val Shaw.
Present.
And Councillor Max Thompson.
Present. Thank you very much. We now turn to agenda item 3, the minutes of the meeting of the 26th of November. Has anyone got any comments on those? Or if not, can I have a motion to accept those as an accurate record of the meeting? Motion. Thank you, Councillor Hawson. Any seconder? Councillor Hannaby. Right, all of those in favour of those? Okay, thank you very much. Those against? Any abstentions? Few abstentions, people who weren't here, but I will accept those and sign as a correct record of the meeting after the meeting. Agenda item 4 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest this evening? I can't see any, so I'll say let's start with that. Agenda item 5 is urgent business. Emily Hamilton, do we have any urgent business this evening?
No, Chair.
Okay, excellent. And then finally, public participation. I confirm we have a number of speakers on both the 2 applications we're going to be considering this evening, and I will call on those in turn. And with that, I turn to the first of the items we're considering this evening, which is the workshop on premises 22A6 and 6A High Street. Catherine, I believe you're presenting on this one.
I am. Can I share my screen?
Please do.
See now, can't we?
Okay, the first application to be considered is the redevelopment of land on High Street in Stevington, located to the rear of the co-op building, outlined in red on the plan. I'll go through the details of the proposal, but there were just a couple of points to raise at the start. Although the current proposal includes 5 parking spaces in the rear parking garage, as shown on the site plan, landscaping plan and drainage plan, the floor and elevation plans for the rear building still show the earlier version of the cycle parking and a covered walkway to the entrance, and this is an error. And these have now been corrected, and for clarification, revisions for each of these plans will be included in the approved plans list. And point 2, since the committee report was published, 1 additional letter of support has been received. And this highlights the need for, the representation highlights the need for more family-friendly, affordable and accessible commercial space in the village, and makes the case that most people using the businesses are likely to live in the village and travel on foot. This just points out the corrections around the walkway, the reconfiguration of the parking garage, and just ties it all in with the plans that have already been consulted on. The site is currently vacant, and has been for some time. As you'll see from the photos, there are a number of empty smaller commercial units along the front, but the site is predominantly occupied by a large warehouse building to the rear, which backs onto commercial gardens, residential gardens. Within the site are several smaller commercial buildings, as well as a small barn, which, although it isn't designated, is of historic interest, as you can see here. The proposal is made up of 4 key elements. At the back, there's an apartment building where 7 units are proposed. This element was previously approved in 2021. The permission has now lapsed, but this shows its position within the site and how it relates to neighbouring buildings. The 2 elements proposed which front onto the high street. I'll just flick through the plans of the apartment building at the back, just to clarify that. So that's on the right is the view as you'd see it within the courtyards, and then bottom left shows facing out towards the gardens and orchard, and the image on the right is how it looked, that elevation facing onto the co-op car park. And again, just setting out 2 units on the ground floor, further 4 at first floor level, and then 1 at second floor. There are 2 elements of the proposal fronting the high street. These include 2 commercial units on the ground floor and 5 apartments over first and second floor. This is how it would appear from High Street and the new elevation, with a sort of undercroft access at this point. And again, showing the new section and the element along the high street at the moment that's to be demolished. The yellow sections show the commercial units on ground floor, and then the 5 other apartments would be above that. That's set out here. So as you can see, quite a few of them are arranged as maisonettes over the first and second floors. Finally, the small barn is proposed to be converted into a communal bike store. All existing structures apart from the barn are proposed to be demolished to make way for redevelopment of the sites. And just highlighting this point here, the 30 cycle spaces are being achieved through 2-tier system, and then there's an additional or Sheffield stands next door to it. Her next slide shows the 2 access points. The main vehicular access would be onto the high streets, Then a large vehicle access, so up to approximately 8 metres, or vehicles up to 8 metres in length, would be onto the causeway. So the causeway access would be bollard controlled, but yeah, the main access is onto the high streets, and that's links through to all the parking spaces and the parking garage. The bollard controlled entrance onto the causeway would be controlled by bollards and secured in the legal agreement. I'd like to run through a comparison between the application considered at appeal and the current proposal. This is partly to consider the elements that are unchanged and were acceptable in the view of the inspector, and partly to consider the issues raised by the inspector that have since been addressed. Just to talk you through the plans here. On the left is the scheme that was considered appeal. This yellow section shows the barn, which was to be extended and to be converted into an additional residential unit. So that note. And then on the comparison on the right, you can see retention of the barn to be used as a cycle store, not as a dwelling. And the extension has been permitted from the scheme, and this area now forms a small garden seating area. One of the key elements the inspector was concerned about was the main turntable. That's been removed from the scheme and replaced with an area that can achieve turning, manoeuvring for large vehicles. And you've also got as we've already talked through, the bollard restricted access for large vehicles onto the causeway, which is a new element. And looking at the next half of the scheme, if you look at the parking garage under the previous scheme, there was another turntable to allow cars to move around, access the parking spaces, and quite a lot of the cycle storage was accommodated in that parking garage. So the turntable on the current scheme has been completely removed. The cycle storage has been relocated to the barn area, and now there are now 5 clear spaces to be used as parking. So to pull that all together, the inspector identified no harm to the conservation area. The design and layout of the buildings and separation distances to neighbouring dwellings, which raise no concern at appeal, are comparable to the current proposal in terms of design, heritage impact and privacy. This covers the apartment building to the rear, as well as the commercial and residential units along the front. The inspector made it clear that the level of parking was acceptable and there was no requirement for a higher amount. The main concerns related to the risk of failure of the turntables put forward as a manoeuvring solution, and the cramped nature of the developments. One unit has been removed from the current proposal, and an extension to the barn has been omitted, opening up the centre of the courtyard. The turntable has been removed. A small grassed area has been introduced with seating. Manoeuvring within the site for the purpose of deliveries and residential parking is achievable for vehicles up to 8 metres long. Technical details requested by Highways Officer have been secured under Condition 10, and also the requirement for a Section 278 agreement. Waste collection has been clarified in the planning statement to be a private collection, so there's no need for a council-sized large vehicle to enter the site. In this way, previous concerns about that have been addressed. In summary, 12 residential units and associated parking can be accommodated on the site within the proposed layout. During the course of the application, officers have had regard to flood risk, drainage and the sequential test, impact on residential amenity, parking, access, manoeuvrability and highway safety, heritage impacts, design, scale and layout, and the proportion of affordable housing. The scheme meets technical standards and is policy compliant. I'm however happy to answer any technical points on these matters, and it may be useful to refer back to parts of the presentation at that stage. Finally, officers recommend approval of the application subject to conditions, and completion of a Section 106 agreement, including build-to-rent affordable units secured as 25% of the scheme. This amounts to 3 units. I pass back to the chair and committee to discuss the proposal in more detail.
Thanks, Catherine. I'm sure we'll turn to you for some questions once we've heard from our speakers. So we've got 3 speakers on this application. The first is Sheena Broadbent, Chair of Steventon Parish Council. Sheena Broadbent.
Hello.
Hi there. We can see you and we can hear you, and we'll have 3 minutes when you're ready. Thank you for joining us.
Okay. So good evening. Hopefully you have had the chance to read the points I sent out earlier today. Steventon Parish Council really want the developers to get this project right for the benefit of improving an eyesore and providing homes and facilities for the village, but is disappointed that this application has come before the planning committee yet again with little change since the previous hearing, apart from 1 less apartment, the loss of the turntables and the barn now being earmarked for cycle storage. Following the previous hearing, the Parish Council met with the developer's agent to discuss a way forward with what would be acceptable to us on this development. We had a very positive discussion and the agent drew up a revised plan with slightly fewer but slightly larger apartments, which was far more acceptable to us. Inexplicably, this was not the plan which came back to the council, but the previous plan with the slight adaptations. A slightly smaller scale with fewer apartments would be far more preferable and in keeping with a rural village. So Steventon's flooding problems are huge. The site's courtyard is in flood zone 1, but both access points are in flood zones 2 and 3. The drainage scheme relies on infiltration and permeable paving, but groundwater levels are shallow and may rise further if Thames Water's proposed reservoir is built, a potential increase of at least 0.9 metres. This risks future groundwater flooding and undermines the long-term safety of the development. As you will recall from your previous site visit to Steventon regarding this project, this part of the village is very busy at peak times, with traffic in all directions, but also school children crossing the high street to the school bus stop. Pavements are narrow and vehicles are coming from 5 directions. Added vehicle movements from the 2 proposed exit routes from this development, as well as deliveries to the business units, would simply add more danger and congestion to an already overly busy area. And we would say we are still extremely concerned about large vehicles exiting the site on the causeway. The causeway is a historic monument, and the length of vehicles suggested and the size turning on a very tight corner at times where it's literally one-way traffic on that road because of the way it's parked, it risks damage to the causeway. So we would urge the planning committee to refuse this application as it stands and request redesign before it can be resubmitted. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I'll now turn to committee to see if there are any questions of clarification for you. Does anyone have any questions of clarification? I can't see any, so I'll say thank you very much for your time this evening and your statement here. And now I'll turn to our second speaker on this application, which is Andy Meader. Excellent. Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening, Mr. Meader. As with everyone else, you'll have 3 minutes when you're ready. Then please, take it away when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. You'll be aware that this sustainable site at the centre of the village has been in need of redevelopment for many years. Following amendments to the scheme that's been previously supported by your officers but refused by the planning committee, it is strongly hoped that a solution has now been found. Following the reduction of the number of dwellings on site and an increase in soft landscaping, as has been explained, the proposal once again has the support from all your officers. It's noted the Parish Council still raised some concerns, as we just heard, and I'd like to address those. They suggest there's insufficient parking. For clarification, the parking provision adheres with the Council's own parking standards, as confirmed by your highway and planning officers. The matter was considered as part of the previous appeal, the inspector finding that 1 parking space per dwelling was entirely appropriate for this site. As a result, both professional officers and an independent inspector have all concluded the proposed parking provision is appropriate, taking into account the type of dwellings, sustainable location, and good bus links available. Parish Council referred in their written response to there being no wildlife provision at the site. This is a village centre location on a site covered in buildings and hard stands, as you've seen. Following amendments made, a notable area of soft landscaping is now proposed centrally in the site, in addition to a green planting wall that's been proposed on the landscaping plan. These will offer real opportunities for wildlife and biodiversity gain. With regards to flooding, much detailed information was submitted and considered carefully by officers. For clarification, no concern was raised by the previous appeal inspector with regards to flooding matters, and the scheme now incorporates an area of soft landscaping that wasn't proposed in the appeal. Your committee report sets out clearly and comprehensively from section 7.7 why the commercial users and residents of the proposed units will be safe from flooding for the lifetime of the development, and why development of the site as proposed will not increase flood risk elsewhere. 7.12 of your report confirms why relevant independent experts advise the sustainable drainage system proposed will actually be an improvement on the existing situation. With regards to concern about overdevelopment, it's acknowledged that the inspector did raise this when dismissing the previous appeal. In response to this, a dwelling has been removed, allowing a notable area of soft landscaping to be introduced centrally in its place. The inspector raised no concern about the scale of buildings previously and focused on the internal layout, which has now been enhanced. As recognised by the Council's own planning and heritage officers, the scheme will have a positive impact on the conservation area, as encouraged by the neighbourhood plan. It will also make efficient use of the site, as encouraged by the NPPF. I've addressed the parish concerns, but you also have seen the letters of support from local residents, keen to see the transformation of this site with improved facilities and housing for the village. With the further amendments that have been made, the proposed scheme is now in clear adherence with relevant policies and offers a real opportunity to enhance the village.
So I'm afraid you've had your 3 minutes, so if you could sum up very quickly.
We hope you can support your officer's recommendation.
Thank you very much. I'll now see if there are any questions of clarification. There may be some questions, so let me just see. Has anyone got any questions of clarification, Mr. Needham?
Can I ask?
Yes,
I'm interested in why you chose to go back to part of the. I was part of the original. I was a councillor, then we went round the time. So the councillors said that they would have preferred larger apartments, but you've gone back and stuck virtually with the first one. Could you tell us why you thought that was the best?
The parish council. Yeah.
No, you've just heard the council.
But basically, there's obviously a lot of things that have to go into consideration. We did approach the parish council, and they were reluctant to move in some directions that we would have liked to have gone in. It's a compromise situation that was put forward. Obviously, it has to be viable from the developer's point of view. I think with the centrally located site as it is, and the council's own demand for this type of housing, it was considered an appropriate solution, even if not admittedly exactly what the parish council wanted. But we think, given the site, it's appropriate for this type of accommodation.
And the viability had to be taken into
That's right.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I mean, basics. How many EV charging points are there?
There's going to be one for each dwelling. So it's one of the conditions. I think condition 18 or condition 19 will require that. So all of the residential units will have an EV charging point, and then I think I forget now whether it's a couple. One. I think one serving each commercial unit to the front as well.
Solar panels?
We haven't got solar panels as part of the scheme at present, but it's something that can be looked at further down the line. It's not as part of the scheme at present. It's again, it's something that I forget exactly the way the roof slopes face in this situation, but the developer will consider it. Obviously, energy prices are changing all the time. I'm happy that we can go away and have another look at it, but I can't here and now say it will definitely happen. But if you'd like to put an informative on there, requesting that it's investigated and responses given, and I'm happy to pass that on, because I'm not developing it myself. I can't give you an assurance, but I'm more than happy to put that through.
Can I ask a couple of questions about the cycle parking. So firstly, I was concerned that it doesn't actually seem to meet the county council's design standards for cycle parking because it's two-tier. And looking at that brand of cycle rack, at least half of the ones in the barn will be post rack style bike parking. So we actually have quite a bit of this in the area. So I know as a cyclist, it is pretty much impossible to use to let the bike to securely. It's a bit of a waste of space. And the design, the parking standards are clear that double-decked or vertical cycle parking should not be used unless agreed in specific circumstances. And it should ideally be Sheffield stands locked, fixed permanently to the floor. So I wondered why you'd gone for a different kind of cycle parking, or if you're aware that that doesn't meet the local cycle parking standards. And also, and I don't think is covered in the parking standards, is there any consideration of electric bike charging? Because as the parking's not within dwellings, it wouldn't be possible to just kind of plug in.
So on the first point, it was a matter that was discussed with the highways officer as far as the appropriateness of cycle stands. So there was discussion on that. It was considered. I guess we got the unusual situation of it being a heritage, non-designated heritage asset as far as the building is within. So whilst it might have been nice to make it a little bit bigger, in reality we had to work with that particular barn. So as a result, it was finding a cycle storage that would work within that area. If it was an empty site and we'd been able to make it a metre or two larger, we could have accommodated a different type of cycle provision. Obviously, there's a lot. I think from memory, there's 30 within the actual barn itself, and then we have got the Sheffield stands outside as well. So there is a variety of storage there. So I think it's you referred yourself to the fact that in some situations other solutions may be appropriate, and I'd suggest that that's what's happened here because of the restrictions because of working within a particular building. You've also got obviously the grant with regards to the EV point that hasn't been raised as a requirement. I don't believe it's a requirement in the standards, but I completely appreciate this moving thing. I've just got an electric bike myself last week, so I'm very familiar with the issue. Obviously, ground floor apartments would potentially have the ability, but I appreciate it's not ideal. But I mean, it's something that we can look at within the barn. I'm not sure how practical it would be with regards to electric. It's not got electric in that present, but happy to investigate that further because I recognise moving forward it's something that you would want to encourage as well.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Pickles.
Could you just clear up for me the way in which the ingress and egress points will work for the site?
Sure.
And how the bollard operation will direct people down certain routes?
Yeah, so basically the main access will be onto the high street as it is at present. So it's based on the existing access arrangement. So that obviously the undercroft would be going underneath an undercroft, but otherwise it's the same situation. You've got good visibility in both directions. So that will be the primary access for people who are residing there and to access their car parks in and out. However, because of the undercroft situation, it's not great for larger vehicles, and as a result, the alternative access off the causeway is going to be required where you do have removal bans, bigger vehicles for whatever reason. That will only be very occasional, and as a result, there will be a bollard operation for that. So people living there will be able to control when that does go up and down, and it's only sort of with agreement with those who are residing there, potentially with commercial operators as well. They may have some deliveries coming through that way. So it will be occasional use and controlled by the people who are within the site.
Thank you.
Okay. I can't see any further questions. So thank you very much for your time this evening. And I now call upon our final speaker on this application, Councillor Whiteman. Councillor Whiteman, are you there?
Hello, Chair.
Hello.
Right, so Chair, members, I just want to be clear from the outset that I am not opposed in principle to the redevelopment of this brownfield site. No one is. Steventon supports appropriate development where it is well designed, safe and sustainable. And hopefully you've all read my email with regards to this proposal. And again, once commercial and business units are really welcomed, remember that Steventon has had an increase of 49% in population between censuses. And I ask you to remember, as ward councillor, and you've heard from the parish chair, we are the on-the-ground intelligence day to day. I don't think the developer has actually been fair in his speech to the parish council. They haven't been reluctant at all. And please let's remember that they represent the villagers now and the future. The question I put before you, though, is whether this proposal in this location complies with the VOWH local plan and can function safely over its lifetime. In my view, it cannot. My focus is on day-to-day operation, not theory. First, access and highway safety. This development relies on a very constrained access, on a very constrained, congested high street and the historic causeway. Both narrow routes already subject to vehicle and pedestrian conflict. The scheme depends heavily on internal vehicle movements and the management of those parking movements. It's a very restricted space. These are not fail-safes. They rely on user compliance and introduce long-term operational risks. Safe access for residents and service vehicles and emergency vehicles has not been convincingly demonstrated, contrary to Core Policy 35 and Development Policy 16. It's not a square. Please note that the photos submitted in the Transport Evidence Report look like a very peaceful causeway. That's because it was closed due to the demolition of a building near that causeway access to this proposed development. Parking provision, you've picked up on that. It's too tight for 12 residential units plus commercial spaces. Those commercial spaces don't have enough potential space for their visitors. We want to encourage businesses to be able to have visitors. It just feels like, again, they're going to rely that people are going to park on the surrounding streets and maybe just, you know, impede on the village hall again. Tenancy restrictions are not planning solutions. You cannot replace adequate physical provision. You've only got to look at the parking at the co-op in peak hours and the overspills. You know, bollards will just be lip service, and over time residents will get annoyed with them and they'll just get rid of them. Servicing and utility and waste collection. My biggest piece on this is, you know, we're going to have residents that are going to be paying council tax, but now they're going to be expected to pay for private waste collection because they can't get in. So that there is no current provision that works for this development for waste collection. And I urge you to look at this properly. The high street already has commercial HGV drop off on the pavement space for the co-op, and it causes havoc. There is overdevelopment and flood risk. And I would just say this, it is contrary to core policies 37 and 42. Because you've only got to look at the latest Section 19 report. And if CESRO was to happen, this would get flooded. Cycling, interesting. It sounds like there's no electric in that barn. So how do you find your bike in the dark? In conclusion, whilst we welcome redevelopment, it has to be acceptable in principle that this proposal fails to comply with multiple local plan policies and it risks long-term safety and operational problems. And it's just not fair on future residents or those future businesses. So please either refuse this application or require yet again a redesign before any permission is granted. It just feels like the developer hasn't listened to any previous feedback from planning committee, parish or the inspectorate. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Councillor Whiteman. I'll see if there are any questions for you from members of the committee. I can't see any, so I'll suggest we move on to questions for our officer. So, does anyone have any questions for Catherine? Please, Councillor Hanby.
There's quite a lot that we came out here. I'm interested in the area that the inspector looked at. Mm-hmm. And I'm very pleased that we have got rid of the turntable, I must say. So the inspector, on the whole, actually was content with the design.
Yes,
is that a correct statement?
Yeah, there were no concerns over the design, heritage impacts, scale of the buildings themselves. It related back to overdevelopment in terms of number of units on the site, how vehicles were manoeuvring within the site, and that crucially came down to the turntable. It was exacerbated by extension of the barn to create an extra dwelling, and those elements have been taken out and replaced with a more appropriate space for manoeuvring of vehicles, and with the small green space as a sort of positive element of amenity and landscaping.
And the highways are happy with the going on to the causeway.
Yeah, highways are happy in terms of number of spaces provided and have considered the manoeuvring in the site. They have asked for details around visibility displays, crossovers, technical detail. which is the standard sort of detail you would look at section 278, the technical detail stage. And on that basis, we've included conditions to secure that, and there will be a section 278 stage anyway. Also included within the legal agreement is the need for WN9 consultation, and the reason behind that is to make sure cars aren't parking right up against the access points to allow visibility displays to be demonstrated.
And the engineer, our drainage engineer, I've looked at, as I usually do, the comments from all our officers and consultees, and there's no disagreement now, all are content.
No, that was drainage, flood risk, sequential test was something we looked at in very close detail, and that's why it's taken such a long time to bring applications committee. And yeah, there's no objection from drainage.
Thank you.
Catherine, I've got. Oh, sorry. Because you want to go to it relates to
Just a quick one. Has a sequential test been performed? That's one of my questions I sent.
Yes,
because it wasn't clear to me in the papers.
That was a sticking point very early in the application process, and it's been discussed at length with the applicants. So the approach we've taken with that as a starting point, there are flats being proposed above flood zones 2 and 3, and the commercial units would sit within flood zones 2 and 3. So as a starting point, a sequential test is required, and the general steer behind that is to put developments that's proposed in flood zones 2 and 3 in lower risk flood zones. In looking at that, in September, there's been updated guidance in the PPG, which strongly pushes for a more pragmatic, more practical application of sequential tests. And in doing that, you have to be satisfied that the lifetime of the development, occupants would not be at risk from flooding, and that there would not be displacement of water onto other sites. So that's sort of where we got to. The next step on from that, we considered that the commercial units would be replacing existing floor space. The residential units at first floor, second floor would be away from floodwater, and would also, occupants would go down into flood zone 1. The units at the back would all be in flood zone 1. There were measures being designed into the scheme to reduce the amount of hard standing there. Also, we looked at floor levels to make sure that nobody was at risk. So within the whole package of measures, and I would say officers did a light touch sequential test and then balanced it with a pragmatic approach. We were satisfied that it does pass it. It's also been considered in light of 2 to 3 quite recent case law studies where they've been brought to the inspector and a sequential test had not been done. A balancing act was done with other matters, still looking at the lifetime of the scheme in terms of flood risk, and quite a few of those were approved, even with the sequential test not having been done, with this new steer towards taking a pragmatic approach. So officers have had a good look at it and have been very aware of it, have weighed it up, and just because a formal sequential test was not submitted, that it's not an automatic failure of the scheme.
So it's against policy, but not a failure.
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So sorry, I promise it is related to.
Okay.
So you say there's been some risk mitigation around, I assume, water entry into property somewhere.
Yes.
However, the other concern about the flood risk is people getting in and out of buildings, because I think the chair of the parish council summed it very well about what happens on the causeway. It does wash around the side, and it does all kinds of strange things to the way in which people drive their cars. And it does worry me that you almost kind of imprison people in their buildings. Was that considered as part of the flood risk evaluation?
It was, yeah. So going back to the very early scheme of the apartment block, which was in flood zone 1, at that point we said how are people going to get in and out of the access points, and that was included in part of the mitigation to improve the access points, and that was carried through to the appeal proposal. There was no objection to that sort of drainage scheme and those measures, and that's been carried through to the current scheme and secured by condition, along with requirement for emergency evacuation procedure. So that's been looked at quite well, a lot of detail by officers, but also by the drainage officer. And subject to those conditions, we're happy that people will be safe on the sites and will have safe access in emergency.
Thank you. Apologies.
No, it's fine. So again, I've got a couple of questions. I think they're quite quick. The first one is this idea of a lifetime of the development. What is that scale? Because it's mentioned quite a lot in the report, and I wasn't sure exactly how long that was.
So in terms of the technical assessment, it's not just that people move in for 5 years, it's fine at the moment, and then suddenly as climate change exacerbates things, suddenly flood risk then becomes a problem. It's sort of picturing the worst case scenario. I can't remember the exact, I don't know if it's every year, 100 years, or it's a significant period of time to make sure
several decades, not at least, right?
Yeah, to make sure that it stays like resilient, the occupants remain safe, the buildings remain safe, it doesn't displace water off site, for the lifetime of development for a considerable period of time. That's the idea behind that.
Okay, thank you. And then the other thing is, so I read the inspector's report on the appeal, and just correct me if I'm wrong. So it seemed that there were two main rationales behind refusing the appeal. The first was to do with the turntables, which have resolved it. The second was to do, I've written down cramped internal layout. I believe I took that from the report itself. So just so I'm clear in my mind, your recommendation is partly based on the fact that because there's one dwelling reduced and also the landscaping area, it no longer will appear as a cramped internal layout. So it no longer is against core policy 37 and it's no longer overdevelopment.
Yeah, there's a sort of a visual amenity sense in terms of it's been opened up, so it feels more spacious. Okay. And then there's the practical element in terms of you've got greater manoeuvring space. So the issues that the turntables were trying to solve, have now got that space to manoeuvre without relying on that. And
I'm sure it's in the report, but I mean, who's going to be maintaining the landscaping of that particular area, maintaining the area generally be a maintenance company or?
Generally, yes, we have got a section 106 running alongside the permission, so that can be tied up in that.
Okay, I have one final question, and it's probably something very small, which is that I noticed on the previous application, which again I looked at, it had 4 parking spaces outside the commercial properties. This one only has 3. I was just wondering what the rationale was for it. I realise it's still compliant with OCC highways policy, but why is it 3 when it was 4 before?
I don't particularly have the answer, but I do know that the 4 spaces on the front accommodate 3 for the commercial and then 1 extra for the apartments. So, so
there's 1 fewer on the site and there's 1 extra on the...
so how it's being reconfigured to make sure that they're accessible and usable parking spaces.
Okay, thank you. Okay, right, hand back. Councillor James.
Thank you. Yes, I've got a few questions as well. So I am concerned about the usability of the cycle marking, because I know it might seem like a small thing, but I think increasingly we are seeing schemes in the area, and I know there are a lot on Harwell campus at Didcot Parkway station where there's this 2-tier cycle parking built, reasonable expense, and then nobody uses it, and then everyone says, "Oh, cyclists don't need or use facilities when we build them for," because it's just not usable. You can't lock the bike by the frame, so it's not secure. So your insurance isn't valid. You can't. It's quite difficult for a lot of people, me included, and don't become that feeble to get a bike onto the top rack. Depending on the exact shape of your bike, they just won't fit on those toast rack things. They're either the wheels are too narrow and they fall off, or they're too fat and they won't sit in them, or they won't sit alongside the bike that's next to it just because you and the other person have different weight handlebars. And there's endless problems about them, which is why it's very clear in the cycle parking standards that you shouldn't use them. You should use Sheffield standards, and they should be on a level, because those are accessible for a flexible range of bikes and cycling, sort of real world situations. And I think Councillor Whiteman's point that there's no lights is also interesting, because So if you cycle commute, surely is the aim of having bike parking on this, and you work conventional work hours, you are going to be coming home in the dark or leaving in the dark for several months of the year in Britain. So it's, that just doesn't work at all. And so I really feel it's ill. I'm really worried about that going forward. It just seems like a complete white elephant, really, and a waste of that heritage building. I'm also concerned about the car parking. It does look really tight in that undercroft parking at the far end. To get in and out, that does look problematic.
Councillor James, I'm just very mindful that we might be getting towards debate.
Sorry.
So I don't know if you've got any more specific. So
I guess,
please
sorry, my
re-raise these.
question is, I guess, is can we look at the conditions around things like the cycle standards? So at the moment, it asks, it conditions cycle parking being built to the design, but could we put in a condition asking for cycle parking, asking them to bring forward designs for cycle parking that meets the parking standards?
Can I come back on the cycle and vehicle parking? So I think, yeah, you're right. At the moment, it's a compliance condition with the details that we've already got. And I think that's the high number, the 30 in the barn, and I think I counted, and it's another 8 that can be dealt with the shepherd stands. That's come about because there are very high standards through OCC, and it's a balancing act between the numbers and the quality of the cycle storage. I think there could be some scope, yes, to ask for a cycle scheme, and within the barn, we look at Sheffield stands sort of built into it, and just from very rough calculations, I think we could then, if it was acceptable to members to have a drop in number of spaces, but the quality of the storage is better, that may be a better way forward. I think we could probably achieve around 30-32. In terms of the lighting, we could ask for a lighting scheme for the site itself, and that could include, what lighting is provided on or in the barn. Coming on to the vehicle parking.
Did Highways comment on the manoeuvrability, usability?
Yeah, there was no objection to the number of spaces. What we'd be looking for there is a 5 metre depth of the parking space, and then 6 metres behind to allow for reversing out. The one on the very far end is quite a bit wider, which then sort of allows for manoeuvrability there. It is tight, but it appears to work in a sort of technical. Okay. We've got the tracking for it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I ask, just to follow up on this? What, again, I don't want to preempt what we're going to do in debate, but what would be the minimum amount of cycle parking provision that would be compliant with OCC standards? So if we were minded to say we want a more advanced scheme that had those, what is the minimum? Because we wouldn't want to be out of compliance with OCC. So what would be the minimum number if we were minded to go that way?
What officers have looked at is we'd always use that the cycle standards as a starting point. But there have been cases where we've looked at a condition stage saying, well, this provides a better quality of cycle parking or brings it into a better location, and the drop is actually beneficial to the scheme, even having slightly lower numbers. So I'd say, as proposed, we've got 38 bicycle spaces, and I think if we brought it down to perhaps 32, I think that would still be within the.
Okay, and for clarity, were we minded to discuss that in debate? Would we need to change condition 21 to that effect to give officers a bit more license to?
Yes. So it would be asking for a new scheme.
Okay.
It would be up to members whether we set a number again or just request a cycle scheme, and then we look at it in more detail at that stage.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I didn't need to. Please, Councillor.
Can I just cover the undercroft and the vision display at the entry point onto the high street, effectively? that does concern me, given it's a pedestrian. There are going to be commercial units there. There are going to be parking spaces there. There's quite a bit. I mean, I'm familiar with the site. There's quite a busy footpath in peak times there.
Yeah.
Can you give assurance that you believe that the condition is strong enough to ensure that we get the right kind of solution and highways are content, not to have that agreed before the approval is given?
With the comments, so the comments that have come from the planning development management team were generally happy with those elements that they looked at. The concerns raised around visibility displays, crossovers came from the technical team. So, and the team that would be dealing with the 278s. So it's not reasonable to bring those elements into planning at this stage. But we have got the measures secured through the conditions and also through the 278 agreement that has to be provided. We're looking at a road that's generally so slow speed. There is the space to achieve the visibility displays, and there are existing access points. And I think to try and get those at this stage, or to push back on the scheme simply because those details aren't available, would be overly restrictive.
So the reason why I ask the question is because it talks to the practicality of the scheme, because having that as the main entry exit point, and in fact whilst I agree there's also a crossing there and all kind of things going on, and there's a bus stop, and it's a very busy, might be slow speed traffic, which I don't quite agree with, by the way, but it is a very, very busy area at times, and it does worry me that it questions the whole, comes back to this whole debate about the development, it's being overdevelopment because of the suggestion that
I don't think we're redesigning, but I just do you have a further question?
Or I have a further question, but not on this subject.
Okay.
I take your point that in your opinion, you've got concerns because it may become a principal matter. I think planning officers have enough information on the scheme that visibility displays are achievable. So we're treating it as a technical matter that can be resolved. I think that's probably the different opinion.
Further questions?
Yes, I'd like a few more details. The waste collection. We're basically saying the district vehicles can't collect this waste. There must be some private arrangement. How do we ensure that this private arrangement is adequate?
So it's not. There are schemes within the district where we asked for that, and particularly because it's relatively tight within the middle, it wouldn't be practical for a council vehicle to access and leave. It is just about within 25 metres of the roadside, so there is scope that a vehicle could collect, bring crews in. I've noticed in the planning statement it does touch on the private collection, and that's why we're exploring that route. There's a condition to ask what the waste collection strategy would be, so that both of those options are still available. It's secured by condition, and it's not an unusual measure for schemes like this where the access is a little bit tightened and it doesn't allow a vehicle to come into the site.
It just seemed a bit vague to me, but I'm looking at conditions, and I think they're probably adequate.
We are asking for extra details about when the collections would be, how regularly, what sort of vehicle will be used. That's tied into the condition, so we will be asking or seeing those further details.
Thank you. Any further questions? We'll move into debate. Well, Councillor Shaw.
Getting back to my solar panels, was the developer ever asked to provide them, or to make a case for why they couldn't be provided?
We haven't got there's not the policy requirement to insist on that, but I would say that it does come up in building regulations, so that's probably the most appropriate stage where that would be captured.
Any further questions? If not, I'll suggest we move into debate. Okay, well, to move into debate, we need a motion. So someone like to put a motion. Councillor Hannafy.
Yeah, I would very happily, as it's this site, propose that we accept that the officer's recommendations with the conditions attached, unless you want further conditions, of course, in debate. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a second for that? So we can move to debate. Councillor Buxton.
Yes, I'm going to second it. I think officers again have looked at this in a lot of detail over a number of years, and it's probably the best solution we're going to find.
Okay, so I open the floor to debate. Who would like to pick off? Councillor Hannafy.
As I said it, it's not an area that I visited, but before Christmas I had to be in that area, and I went round and I thought, oh my goodness, that's still not been developed, etc. So that was quite interesting. And then of course we've got this before us, and having actually been a councillor on this application, and the fact that we really went on the site and had a really good look, etc. So I've got that in my head exactly what we're saying. I'm very pleased that the circular turn day was gone. I'm very pleased that highways haven't put any objections in, and I'm pleased that our drainage officer is content up until you're going to be talking about conditions, etc., and firm that out. So I think on the whole, I think Stevenson deserves that corner to be redeveloped. And I think the fact that it has got business as well in the front is a real bonus. And it's going to bring much needed accommodation in that area. Thank you.
Councillor James.
My feeling is that I'm happy to support this motion. I feel that, it's a scheme that has still got issues. It has got pluses and minuses. But, I do live a bit close. I know the site, and I do think it has improved from the earlier planning application and dealt with at least some of those issues. I would like to propose that we do put a different condition on the cycle parking in to ask them to come forward with a plan. I certainly, I would strongly feel that actually going for the quality over the quantity of the cycle parking is actually going to be more productive for supporting people to actually use the cycle parking and use that as a means of transport they're living there.
I mean, I would support that, and I assume that's
absolutely. But I would caution about putting in the electric, as I have fire and rescue at county, and I caution putting any things for electric there for cycles.
So for clarity,
charging. I would definitely caution at putting any of that inside the building.
So for clarity, we have a motion to accept the officer's recommendation with a slightly amended condition asking for a cycle scheme that will take into account our desire for slightly higher quality, whilst not reducing the numbers massively, but we'll leave that to officers.
So I think really it's in the parking standards, and obviously the standards about numbers and things. There is design considerations 4.11 that clearly for cycle parking says, ideally it wouldn't be two-tier, it won't be toast rack style, and it will be lit and covered. So that's, I think it's to emphasise those design considerations for the cycle parking. We can do that. And personally, as an e-bike rider, and I know that there's bad things in the press, but actually if the bike's legal, then it's not a major flight risk at all. Any more than like your laptop in your house.
But I disagree. My fire officer would agree, disagree.
But, I mean, that would be a nice to have. I wasn't going to propose that we're tweaking this.
We don't want to tweak it too much, but I think this is something we can change by condition, and hopefully the content of the debate will be captured by any developers looking to site. Anything people would like?
I'd like to say something. Actually, please. These kinds of decisions are very difficult because clearly this site needs to be developed, and there's a need for this style of housing, and it's probably a good place to build because it's close to railway links, bus links, and people can cycle to Harwell, wherever. However, it's a lot of units in a very small space. But it's nice that we talk about bikes, but the bigger issues are about the quality of life of the people that actually live there and also the surrounding area. And I still think that this is overdevelopment. I must admit, I was kind of being prepared to have I was on the fence a little bit about this, but the more and more you think about it, reducing it by one unit doesn't really, it helps, but it doesn't really help the situation. There's just too many units for too small a space. And it would have been a better solution to go for fewer larger units, frankly, to create the, to put in a road scheme that is more practical, and also to deal with what is likely to be quite a tight space for people to live. There will be, people will have more than one car per unit, they're bound to, which means that there will be a conflict with the roads around it as well. And it is a busy area at busy times, and the place does flood. I understand the lack of technical objection, and I commend the hard work that's been done on that, by the way, because I know a lot of work has been done. However, I feel I come down on the other side of this. I just feel it's overdevelopment still, and I just think it's actually something that I can't support.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'm quite torn. I'm really fond of the development of a site like this. I think this is exactly the sort of site that should be getting developed, rather than building on green fields. But I take Councillor Pigill's point of it does feel a little bit too much for the site. We talked about the issues on cycle parking, trying to make sense of the different numbers, depending what type of commercial is installed in OCC's recommended standards is a little bit tricky, but seems like it's more or less there. Although I'm not a fan of, with both the cycle and the car parking being split between being at the front and being on the site. So having one of the residential parking spaces out in front of the commercial premises, and having, as best I can understand it, some of the cycle parking is technically for the commercial premises inside the residential area. I might be wrong on that, but from my counting, it has to be to meet the rules. But that's not necessarily a problem. It's just a little minor thing. I haven't really got to come to a conclusion yet. I'm still having to have my mind changed by other members, but I'm still a little on the fence on this one.
Anything further to Councillor Button?
I would hope on this site with the number of units and the good public transport connections, that perhaps we wouldn't be looking at more than, well, even one car per site per dwelling. There may be even less than that. I think this is a case where the county standards of one per resident is perfectly adequate. Steventon is very lucky with its public transport facility.
It's not the way people behave, that's the issue.
We're trying to change that.
Yeah, I know.
Would anyone like to say anything further on this, or should we move towards a vote?
I think in people's deliberations about this, I think there are some practical considerations about how you get in and out of this site as well. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. The best times people will be crossing in front of them. If somebody's coming in while somebody else is going out, I don't actually know how that gets resolved. There's a whole lot of practical considerations as to why this is not actually a good scheme. As a people should bear that in mind when they're making deliberations.
Councillor Hannamy.
Well, I think it is a good scheme. I think that everything's been tested, and we've had it's gone to the inspector as well, and I'm mindful of what the inspector has said. And I think if you saw anything else, he would have probably mentioned that. Highways are okay. Flooding, there is anything in there. I've looked at all the consultees, and I believe one car per dwelling is sufficient. We've spoken at length about the cycle, and we're going to try and reorganise that. And we do have good bus routes, which we're trying to encourage people to use those to get into Oxford or by the station, etc. This has been outstanding for a very long time. We've looked at it. And I think it would be unfair actually to the residents of this area, really, if we did not make, if this went on too long. I can't see anything in the report that would really stop me voting.
I understand your point. All I would say is the inspector did also comment on the cramped internal layout. So it wasn't just about the highway.
But that's been resolved.
I know, I accept that.
By putting that
But I still think it's up to us to make a judgment of whether it is still overdevelopment or not. And so, although I'm minded to vote for the motion, I just want to be clear that I think that it's perfectly reasonable to
the officers have done a very good job.
No, I agree, but I think we could have we are having a debate now really about whether it's overdevelopment or not, which is something that we can.
Well, some of my developments in my area, I could say that too, but they are working.
Anything further on this matter, or shall we take a vote? Councillor Mallison.
Thanks, Chair. My 2 pennies in as well. I was glad to see the turntable removed. That always seems a bit of an overcomplication to me. As the proposal we've got, I've listened carefully to all the remarks of the councillors, so that I think I've been persuaded by Councillor Pickle's remarks about it being overdevelopment. I think people actually living there may find it very difficult as regards parking, access, and it seems to me as if it's just a bit much for the site. And for that reason, I think we could call it overdevelopment. I think that sums up my view of it. So I won't be supporting the motion we've got.
Okay. Anything further, or shall we vote on this? Councillor Rayner.
I'm very conflicted in this because it's apparent that this site is desperate to be developed in some ways. It's a nightmare. The flooding side of it, I'm still not convinced that it's not going to be a problem, because Steventon, as we know, historically suffers horrendously. And as Councillor London said, it has been taken into account. If Sedge Roaders go through, that'll make a difference. I don't know. And it does seem, as far as the inspector picked up, that the internal considerations, as far as it being cramped, is something that needs looking at. It's one of them. It's one of them. But
can we take a vote?
Well, I think I want to make sure that everyone has their piece to say. If anyone's got anything further to say, but we will take a vote if no one has anything further they wish to add to the debate. Okay, in which case we've got a motion on the table to approve the officer's recommendation with the amended cycle conditions. Do you want to just clarify the conditions?
In terms of condition 21, just hearing what's been said, we would change that to ask for, so notwithstanding the details submitted as part of the application, we would ask for new decals and design, and to include a request for lighting in that area as part of that condition. Are there any other matters that you wanted to cover through condition?
I'll just pick up on the ones as well. There is under condition 9, we've asked for a schedule of works for anything being done to the barn. That could also be an opportunity to request details on the lighting, because that would fit in with the schedule of works. And then there's another point of clarification, conditions to the approved plans. It's just to make reference to revisions, that correction that was mentioned.
Yeah.
As the mover and seconder, are you happy with those?
Yes, I am. So if there's a mind to turn this down, could I have your Emily, your thoughts about if they went to appeal again?
Well, no, we're going to have a vote on this. And
well, I thought we still into.
I think
it's very valid, because of course.
Well, I think
if we lose, then it's going to cost a lot of money.
I think we're going to have a vote and see where we get, and then there might be another motion before to either defer or refuse or amend again. And I think what we should do is we should vote on the motion.
When it's going.
Yeah. So everyone's clear on the motion we have before us? Okay. In which case, all those in favour of the motion to approve. I make that 5. Those against. Make that 3. Any abstentions? 1. So that motion to approve is passed.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, officers.
Thank you very much. I now move on to the second item for us to consider, which is the land at Bury Street, Abingdon. And Nat, I believe you're presenting in this end. Excellent. Nat, when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. So this application is referred to Planning Committee as the Vale of Whitehorse District Council is the freeholder of the land, and objections have been received on planning grounds, and therefore this triggers a referral to committee as per the scheme of delegation. So the application site is the northern part of Berry Street in the centre of Abingdon. To the southeast is the rest of the Berry Street shopping precinct. Within the site is a small area of public open space seating around 2 trees. Around this space are several commercial units, some of which are currently unoccupied. The Abingdon Town Centre Conservation Area is immediately to the west, and the site is partially within flood zone 2. Planning permission is sought for public realm improvements, including external alterations to the buildings, the installation of public art, new hard standing, landscaping and public seating, and 2 new kiosks in Class E use. A tree will be removed as part of the development, and a detached kiosk will also be demolished. This is the existing site plan, which shows the 2 trees in the centre of the site. It's the larger tree on the left-hand side of this drawing is to be retained, whereas it's the smaller tree on the right-hand side which is to be removed. And the kiosk which is to be demolished is above the larger tree, currently in the entrance from Bar Street into Bow Street. So this is the proposed site plan. So you can see the 2 new kiosks, one to the left-hand side of the Bar Street entrance, and one to the right-hand side of where the existing smaller tree is, but which will be removed. And you can also see, so there's the new planting around the retained tree, and then there's a sculpture plinth on the right-hand side, again with landscaping around, and there's benches around these new areas of planting, and there's also external seating being provided for units 19A and 20, which are proposed to be combined into a larger unit. And they're described as a cafe, but it's a Class E use, so it's not a specific cafe use, but that is the intention for that unit. So these are the existing elevations. So obviously it was built, I believe, in the 1960s, and its design is typical of that. And also, obviously, you can't quite, my photos will show it, but some of the buildings are looking, they're showing their age, I think it's fair to say. So this is the proposed external alterations. So it just shows some minor elevational changes, and some repainting, etc., and repairing sections of buildings. And also you can see one of the kiosks, which is I don't know exactly which one, but one of the kiosks. And these are more elevations. So you can see at on one of the top images shows an area of public art on the side of a building, and also the new kiosk can be seen. And this is what they call the piazza elevations. This is looking across the public open space, and you can see the retained tree on the left-hand side with planting around it and seating, and then this is the sculpture plinth, but that's the details of that are being conditioned, so that's more just for illustration. And these are the 2 kiosks. So these are some site photos, which again sort of show the fact that a number of the units are empty, and I believe they have been for a number of years. Yeah. And also that just the general condition of the buildings, like I say, showing their age. So that's the kiosk which is to be removed. This on that chap is sat in front of the smaller tree, which is the one that is to be removed. Whereas this is the much larger tree, which is to be retained. And then this is the bathroom entrance, so the kiosk that you can just about make out will be removed. And then this is looking from the rest of Berry Street into the development. So as outlined in the report, officers consider that the main consideration in determining this application is weighing the harm that arises from the removal of the tree without a replacement against the public benefits of the scheme. For the reasons outlined in the report, officers consider that the benefits in terms of enhancing the public realm of this area and the resultant contribution this will make to enhancing the vitality and vibrancy of the town centre does outweigh the harm. Officers therefore recommend that planning permission be granted, subject to the recommended condition.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Nat. We'll return to you for some questions once we've heard from our speaker on this application. Our speaker is Councillor Mark Gibbons, a representative of Abingdon Town Council. Well, good evening, Councillor Gibbons. Thank you for joining us. As with everyone else, you've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. We are supportive of uplifting this whole area. I mean, I totally agree with the general comment. What we're not supportive of is certainly on the tree removal on the second tree. Up until literally this last minute, officers, residents, everybody has supported trying to retain that tree. We believe that what planting we see as an alternative is less attractive to give a green amenity. We think the tree plus would be better. It's not a substantial, it's low level. It appears less resilient to drought, disease without a very, very detailed management schedule. And to date, that area has not really benefited from good management schedules. I think that's very fair to say. So we would like to retain that second tree or find a way of in building it to that part of the development. Again, on the street art and the sculpture, we support that idea, but the proposal today is not really Abingdon centric. It's about the Thames Valley. You know, it interweaves planting through a sculpture. Again, if you don't have a good management regime, you could end up with dead planting through a sculpture, which looks unkempt and horrible and is actually worse than what we're trying to achieve. So we're not enhancing. We could use industry as a theme. There are many industries through Abingdon that have been multi-generational employers and significant and would mean much more to residents to lift that area. Brewing, car production, leatherworking, medical products and science. And those could all offer inspiration. The museum and all various local organisations could offer information to the developer on that and could assist. So a more relevant scheme we would like to see. And moving on to some of the police comments, though, which are very relevant as there's ongoing antisocial behaviour and neighbourhood policing team activity in that area. We think that there's poor lighting from Broad Street to the area concerned. The maintenance is appalling on that and has been consistently. And the ward councillor has been told that school-age girls in wintertime are using torches in that area at night, which is unacceptable to us. CCTV was highlighted, and the CCTV, there didn't appear to be a conclusion to that. It is a privately owned but very significant public area, and I would like to see a conditionality applied for a provision to the owners to consult with Thames Valley Police and come up with an appropriate scheme to assist with ASB. Okay, that's it.
Thank you very much. We may have some questions for you, so let's just...
Sorry, and you have this.
Thank you. Would anyone like to ask any questions? That's good.
Not the question.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for your time this evening. I'll now turn to any questions we might have of our officer. Any questions for now?
Yes.
Please, Councillor Andy.
I'm so pleased something's been started. It's desperate in that area. We know this, don't we? So, and I must say, I am quite in favour of keeping trees because I want to plant more in my town. So, why did you think that it would be okay to take the second tree down, or acceptable to? Let's put it that way, not you personally.
Yeah, so obviously the the application came in, we consulted the forestry officer, they objected on the basis of the loss of the tree and also initially to harm to the much larger tree. And that was obviously put to the agent. And it was made clear from the outset that they wanted to remove the tree and that was not essentially negotiable. So we got additional information that meant that the forestry officer is now satisfied that the much larger tree won't be harmed. But then it was essentially left to us to weigh the harm of that loss of tree. And obviously, yeah, ideally, true. We asked them to retain it. They didn't. So we essentially, it's for us to decide if that's acceptable. And like I say, if officers think that there are enough benefits that outweigh that loss, particularly, and obviously I appreciate it's complicated, the fact that we are the freeholder of the land, but that is essentially irrelevant in terms of the protection that tree has. It has no statutory protection. And I think if we ignore that we're the landowner, whoever owned that land could cut that tree down tomorrow without any consent being required. So I think that personally, as much as it's regrettable, I think it does reduce the level of harm, the weight, that can be given to the harm from its removal. But it's regrettable. There's no getting around it. And obviously, ideally, they would retain it, but that's not what they've proposed.
Okay, thank you.
So we have to assess it on that basis.
Now, I have a question. Could you maybe just respond to the final point made by Councillor Giddens about whether there's any scope for a condition that requires some level of engagement with Thames Valley Police around antisocial behaviour, lighting in the area, etc. Or is that something that I don't know? I'd just like to get your comment on that.
Yeah, so they have proposed. There is some lighting as proposed. Yeah. It's so they're over the bit between the old peacocks. I'm not sure that sort of alleyway at the top. There's going to be lighting above that, so that should improve it. There's also lighting on some of the elevation, but there's no specific, as far as I can tell, looking at the lighting plan, there's no specific proposals for lighting, sort of the Bar Street entrance, etc. So if that was something, but obviously you could condition details of further lighting, but I think you also have to consider that that's an existing situation. Yeah. So is it reasonable to ask them to rectify a situation that exists now? And also, I think I touched on it in my report, but hopefully if this development's successful, there will be more people in the area generally, which will have benefits for safety, in and of itself.
See if there are any further questions. Oh, Councillor James.
Yeah, noting that our speakers' comments about the planting in what is replacing the second tree. Do you think we're able to sort of condition sort of landscaping or planting plans such that we can have some confidence that it will be resilient, it won't end up being a dead plant?
Yeah, so we do there is a landscape condition which requires details to be provided. Currently that has a maintenance, generally we ask for 5 years because that's long enough for it to be established. But if members were concerned, you could add in an element of a maintenance program within that condition if you're concerned that if that is a known issue with that site, that it is possible to add that we also want details of how it will be maintained. And also if you could increase the length that it has to be retained for, if that was something if you thought, but obviously considering if that's reasonable or not. But yes, they provide, it's obviously very high level what they provide at the moment, whereas that condition would require specific plants in specific locations. So we could be more confident about the quality of that landscaping. But I think it's important to know I don't view that as a suitable mitigation for the tree, because clearly low level planting isn't the same.
But it's an important area of town, right? And so, I mean, I've walked past it earlier today, and so I think that were we minded to approve this, I'd personally be quite up for unless it was considered to be totally unreasonable by officers, considering it maybe as a sort of 10-year scheme or something that longer than 5 years, given the importance of the location and what's trying to be achieved in that particular location. And so, Councillor Shaw.
Yeah, I mean, I do wonder whether we need some sort of idea of how often the area should be made or will be maintained. Not, I mean, it should be but how often will it be maintained?
Yeah, so it could say something like and details of management, because at the moment we've got it will just be provided, but it could say and details of maintenance, and that would then be enforceable. That if they say they would do every year they maintain it, and we find they're not, that is then something we can enforce again.
I mean, I suppose the frequency of maintenance depends on what they're going to plant.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, if it's going to be shrubs, then once a year is fine. But if it's going to be anything, well, if it's going on to perennials or whatever, then it needs more.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, like we would be thinking, and obviously that's why I don't want to get into this debate, we'd be thinking about expanding condition 6 from landscaping to be a longer period of time, from 5 years to possibly 10 years, and with details of a management plan that would be approved at that stage. But again, we're not in debate yet. And
so at the moment it says an implementation program, yes. But we could add, so it would say an implementation program and maintenance program as well, so that it's instead of just it having to be provided, it also has to be actively maintained.
Thank you. Councillor Rayner.
Could I just ask, the request about the tree was just turned down?
Yeah.
Is there a reason for that? Is it design? Is it aesthetics? Is it cost?
So yeah,
so we like no.
So we requested it. They weren't, and their justification was based on the benefits of the proposals rather than specifically about the tree. And then that just left us having to decide if it's acceptable.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see Abigail is going to be looking at the artwork, etc. Well, we all know Abigail's work, and I'm just wondering if Abigail could work with if you did work with the town council. We've got I think the river, we've got loads of other things. I quite agree. But it would be good if they could work together to come up with something.
Yeah, so I would certainly, when the details came in, I would certainly consult the arts officer. But I don't see there's any reason why the town council couldn't be invited.
Exactly.
Obviously, ultimately, we would be the decision maker, but I don't see that there's any harm in them
suggest
putting forward
that
their yeah.
Yeah, so I've got a couple of questions on conditions, as you know. Yeah. So the kind of the life conditions around there are some improvement. I mean, I welcome the scheme, by the way. Pity about the tree, but in terms of kind of being specific about the artwork, particularly, can we change the condition to say it should be related to something to do with Abingdon?
Potentially, it's just how precise that is, or it could be potentially. You could maybe have an informative that says that the details of public art should be related to Abingdon. I just worry about the precision of that in the condition, because it's obviously that is quite subjective.
Well, yeah,
usually flowering.
Could we have an informative along the lines of saying that Abingdon Town Council should be I don't want to say consulted, but should be informed.
It would be along the lines of encouraging it. I think it'd be hard to require it. Yeah, it would be. You're encouraged to engage with the town council.
I think that's probably.
Yeah, I mean, I've looked at the conditions, and I feel I agree with Councillor Giddens said that something related to a canal in Reading isn't appropriate for a piece of street art in Abingdon.
Yeah.
And so it needs to be related to the area. The second thing on conditions is about lighting. I mean, there will be a lighting plan for the development that will need to be approved.
So that is one of the approved plans. There is a lighting plan, yes.
But because it's quite specific on what it's doing, well, because it's a plan, is there any way we can get them to look at because we want to deter ASB in that area. Is there anything that we could say there to be more specific about? So for example, you put a nice shrub in next to your public art and it gets ripped out the next day. I'm just wondering if we can say something more about kind of making it more secure and the lighting in that area better, because it is poor at the moment.
Yeah, so if the license they proposed you believe is insufficient, we could request a condition for details of more. But like I say, it's that question of, are we trying to get them to rectify an issue that this development isn't causing?
Well, you see, I look at it slightly different because it's going to increase the footfall. That's the whole reason we're doing this. So if you're going to increase the footfall and also perhaps get a greater representation of the kind of people that actually are there, because at the moment it's young kids late at night, typically. But if you're looking to have a cafe, you're looking to make it a more inclusive space, then you would, I mean, particularly because it gets dark in certain times of the year, which Mark highlighted, you know, so again, sorry, you highlighted about bikes, sorry, Councillor James. You know, so it just starts to get dark around 4 or 5 o'clock. So it's in the interest of the development ability to have good lighting there to reflect the increased footfall and to encourage a more diverse collection of people to be there rather than school kids.
Yeah, so if that's something, yeah, that is possible. Like I said, it's just ensuring that meets the test.
Well, I'm sure Emily can correct some.
Are the plans we've probably got, are they indicative or are they what's shown?
So they are for information, and I am just looking at now. So yeah, in that condition, it's request details of it, but that it shall be in the position shown on the plan. But the actual detail of the art itself.
So the position is set, but the actual details.
Yes.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Any further questions on this before we move to vote? Councillor Hobson.
I just wanted to clarify. So the Vale is the pre-owner,
yeah,
and the leaseholder is private.
The applicant.
He's the applicant.
Yeah.
What's stopping them cutting the tree down without a planning application anyway?
Well, I don't know the specifics of their lease agreement, and I think we shouldn't. We essentially need to ignore the fact that it's the council, and if this was any landowner, they could cut it down.
That was the question I was sort of aiming for.
Yeah, so if this was in a conservation area, I'm not,
because it's not in a conservation area and there's not for TPO.
And obviously the forestry officer, if they would have TPO'd this tree, to stop it being removed, but it clearly is not of sufficient value.
Yes, it's rated in their report. It's rated of the lowest grade.
Yeah, and the forestry officer didn't dispute that as a classification.
Thank you.
Shall we move into debate on this one? Okay, right. Can I have a motion on this application? Councillor Pickles.
I propose we accept it.
Yeah,
I'd like to second.
Okay, I think given what we've discussed thus far,
There have
been a few conditions that sort of emerged. I don't know, Emily, do you want to come in as how you might recommend that we work this out?
So I think with condition 6, which is the landscaping, I think we amend that condition to ask for a detailed programme of maintenance and management, and the provision of 5 years of a shrub or species dying or seriously, you increase that to 10. So that would be condition 6. Condition 8, which is details of the public art, I suggest that condition is reworded saying that that it's actually prior to the commencement of development that the trigger is, and notwithstanding the plans that were submitted, that would just enable a different, this idea of working with a different approach and style, which the town council referenced. Then I think we need an extra condition from what I've heard around details of a lighting scheme to be submitted and approved. And then what we could do is look to consult Thames Valley Police on that, just to work with them in terms of maximising surveillance, improving surveillance, natural light surveillance in the area. So I think they are the 3, I believe, unless there's anything in addition.
Shall I just check the motion mover and seconder are happy with that?
Yes, but that's what I was about to say, not as quite as articulate.
That's okay. That's okay.
So we have a motion with those conditions. So amending condition 6, condition 8, and the condition 11 on a lighting scheme being. Okay, right. I open the floor to debate. That's how it.
I think it's an excellent scheme, and I think with all the conditions, I think we are all nodding our head that it's good. And I'm very interested in what my Abingdon colleagues, my councillors, want, and the town council. So I personally will give it my support as the amendments we've made to Emily Hamilton's there. and hope that we will support.
I think, yeah, I mean, I'll be supporting this. I think that with the increased conditions, I think as well, we've strengthened as much as we can. I think all of us would like to see the second tree retained, but I think on balance, I agree with our officers that the benefits are such that that they not overwhelm, they you know what I'm trying to say, they are in the balance of things. I think that actually it is a better scheme, and so I will be supporting it. Anything else, Councillor Rayner?
Is there a way we can reinforce what Councillor Piggles said about the increase of the viability of the area, the demographic that would use it, especially if it's going to increase some kind of nighttime economy? I'm just thinking maybe if there was a way of saying about the lighting that said, you know, I know this may not be your issue, but if you consider it's going to make you more money, then
Well, I think as part of the lighting scheme details, and particularly if it's done in consultation with Thames Valley Police, we would look at it, obviously, what's the most suitable way. In effect, you want to make sure the areas is vibrantly lit as possible.
Indeed, but not only from a security point of view, it's from an economic point of view for the town. I think yes. So that I don't see, you know, that would be very much, I think, the ethos of that extra lighting condition.
Is there a camera in that area? A camera? Can we ask whether the conditions of camera is sought?
I think in Thames Valley being a consultant on the lighting scheme, that probably is.
So maybe have a little chat with them. We've got 4 new ones around our town, but no, not always accurate. But
I guess that it wouldn't necessarily. I take the point.
Security wise,
yeah, I understand. I think that's something though that could be progressed outside of the planning application.
Yeah, because if it could be centred on there, see, you know, deter vandalism when you've got bits of art and things in the middle. It's something that perhaps a conversation should be had with Abingdon Town Council.
Anything further on this, or shall we take a vote? Right, we have a motion on the table to accept the officer's recommendation on this with those tweaks to conditions and the extra conditions 11 on lighting. So all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We now move on to our final item, which is just for us to note the report on appeals received, staffed and decided. Emily, can I bring you in on this?
There is an error. Apologies, you have been shared all details from South and Vale. Obviously, there will be locations in there that aren't as familiar. Apologies for that. That the Vale and South data has been combined, so apologies. Please just look at the Vale one. Thank you.
Can we consider the Vale aspect of this noted? So noted. Okay. In which case, that just leaves me to say thank you so much to all councillors, to our officers, and to our speakers this evening. And thank you for a spirited debate on these applications. And with that, I close the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Susie, can we stop the broadcast, please?